Today I'd like to talk about how to see fairies, and I'm addressing this video to all of you who are genuinely interested and are really open to this topic, because I've noticed in the past that this sort of topic causes quite interesting reactions, ranging from really aggressive to very lovely. So it's for all of you who can accept the non-physical part and dimensions of our reality, which obviously involves the realm of fairies as well. So when it comes to seeing fairies, one thing is very important, and that is we need to raise our own vibration in order to be able to experience and perceive them. Because of the fact that fairies are part of the non-physical world, of the higher dimensions, basically energetic, it is vital that we raise our vibration and our senses, our higher senses, which all of us have. There's no exception, all of us have them, but the question is whether or not they're active and whether or not we're using them. So if we want to make contact and want to see fairies, this is something we need to do. We need to raise our vibration. And you can do that either by meditating regularly and freeing your mind from everyday life, from all the thoughts that keep you busy during the day and also maybe at night. Whatever keeps you busy, whatever really keeps your mind busy is something that will block those higher senses from really perceiving what is happening around you. So if you want to create an atmosphere where contact with the fairies can happen, this is something you need to do. So maybe you can try and do your meditation regularly when you come back from work or whenever, and I very much recommend for you to go into nature, because this is obviously where you'll have better chances of encountering fairies, or perceiving them, feeling them first of all. But fairies, however, are not tied to nature itself, not just nature. There are also fairies who can be found in urban environments. It's just concrete, and even in places where you wouldn't expect them. I remember seeing one fairy when I was at a metal concert, and I thought that was quite interesting that a fairy actually made it that far into a place and atmosphere that wasn't very welcoming. But yes, they can basically go to places, they can get around. But if you want to make conscious contact, and also if you want to have a better connection, have a very successful meditation, please go into nature. I think the weather's warming up now, so why not go into a park or a forest? Find a spot where you're undisturbed, where there's no one around you, maybe no dogs or nothing that will keep you distracted, and then sit down. Ideally sit on the ground or stand, maybe lean against a tree or something. It's important to have the element of nature, the earth, close to you, so feel it and maybe really sit, feel it, really ground yourself, feel it. I'm not giving you a definite technique how to do it, because everyone does it in a different way. What I like to do often is to cleanse my whole energetic body with light. So I visualize myself beneath a sort of light shower which will wash away all the energetic toxins, all the energies I've been basically soaking in from outside, maybe from other people that don't really belong to me, they're not part of me. So that's something you can do. Visualize light as it cleanses you. Also clear your chakras, very important. Don't forget your third eye and your heart, because essentially you see the fairies with the heart, which doesn't mean you're making them up, but the heart is where all those senses, those higher senses actually sit. So having the heart and the third eye, also the crown chakra, cleansed with light does help. So in any case, I suggest you do a thorough and proper cleanse, so don't leave anything out. And when you feel that you're then grounded, then this is a good place to start communicating with the fairies. What you can do is make a mental call. Some people like to articulate and really say whatever they want to do. Maybe some people like the ritual kind of part in their spiritual practice. However, there's no need really for that. So I leave it up to you. Either you make a mental call or you articulate it. but usually that is fine. You just call upon them, you can invite them, you can ask them to show themselves to you, to send you a sign or whatever, and then please try and pay a lot of attention to whatever images emerge from the inside, what images emerge in front of your inner eye. This is where you will perceive most of the things that are happening around you in the etheric realm, because it's overlapping. Both of our worlds are overlapping, so the fairy realm and our human physical realm are basically lying on top of another. So perceiving what is happening there isn't really that hard, but you need to find a place and time in order to really clear your channels in your mind, in order to be able to pick up whatever you have happening around. So make that mental call, and this is basically how you can start. You can communicate in whatever way you wish, you can tell them whatever you wish to. However, I do advise you to be very respectful, because they're not those sweet little childlike entities, beings. They're not. They're emphasizing a lot lately, and I'd like to share that with you. They're very tired of those stereotypes that we have of the fairies. And when I'm talking about fairies, I basically mean all the beings that belong to the elemental world, to the nature realm. So that can be gnomes, trolls, elves, everything that belongs to that. To some people this might sound crazy, but let me tell you that it isn't. It's just a question of whether or not you can accept this non-physical part of reality or not. So I've had some very interesting encounters, and I have to say that the fairies can show themselves in many guises. They can be very sweet, very lovely, and like those flower fairies and whatever Disney or fairy tales made us believe. But that's just a very small part of what they actually are. So it can also look quite grotesque and frightening, and the wings are not necessarily part of their appearance. Sometimes they only appear as energies. So keep an open mind, and please free yourself from those stereotypes. They don't like them, because they're very limiting, and they limit the way that we might perceive them, the way that we think of them, our expectations. So just throw that all away and make your very own connection and your very own experiences with the fairies. So this is something that you can have a go at. It's a very simple and effective way to start, which is meditation, clearing your mind, calling upon them, and then working with the images that emerge. And then please quiet your ego or your rational mind, which will most probably tell you or make you believe that this is something you're making up. But no, this is how the communication starts, and this is basically the level where you've picked something up, where you've perceived something, and it's then emerging, and you will perceive it with your third eye. So you have actually, whatever image it is that you see, you have seen it on a different level, but that's so subtle that for you it'll be like you've just made this up. But please work with those images. Another thing is, and I'm talking about the outside world, what's happening around us, is that fairies can also, influence nature and whatever we have happening around us when we're out. Let's say you're taking a walk with someone, maybe in an environment where there's no nature, no flowers, trees, anything around, maybe just a very urban environment, and all of a sudden you feel the scent of a flower or something that smells like incense, as if someone was holding it underneath their nose. And that's also another way of the fairies greeting you. So that's another way of how the fairies can make themselves noticeable. They greet us with scents from certain flowers. That's just a way of, just greeting, welcoming. And this becomes very obvious when it's in situations where we're not really thinking of them, when we're not consciously trying to make contact, when we're outside where there's nothing around, which could be the source of that very beautiful scent. That's the fairies. Another thing is when there's no wind around you, everything's really still, you're out in nature, and then just keep wandering around with your eyes, and then you might spot a very small portion, a branch in a tree, or maybe grass bending all of a sudden without any obvious reason. No animal, no nothing, no wind, or you see rustling of, the tree or certain leaves or branches. Although there is no wind, there's no bird, there's no nothing. That's another way that the fairies can show themselves. You will make your very own experiences when it comes to that. Also, they can have an effect on all the elements, namely water, wind, fire and earth. Okay, but water is also something to look out for. So if you're out, maybe if you're sitting by a lake and everything is really still, you see the surface being really still, nothing's moving, there's no fish, there's no insect, and all of a sudden you see a ripple in the water. Also, this could be a fairy, and it will take some time for you to differentiate and find out what the source of what is. So this is another way of how fairies can make themselves noticeable. Having an influence on the elements is obviously very easy for them because they're elemental beings, and I always like to tell that story. I think I might have mentioned it in another video before. When I was still in England, I was at work at the time doing just a rather normal job, which I wasn't very happy about, and I was about to drink water, and this happened to me for quite a long time, really for months in a row. When I was about to drink water, it always felt like, and it looked like, something fell in my glass. And of course what happens is when something falls into your glass, some water will splash out. And that's exactly what happened to me. I was about to drink and then something seemingly fell into my cup. I looked and the water splashed into my face. Repeatedly, over a long period of time. And people around me even noticed and were wondering, like, how do you do that? So that was the fairies, and I understand now, looking back at this time, that this was their way of cheering me up and just saying, hey, take things easier. It's not so bad. It's actually quite an intense time when the fairies paid me visits at night between 2 and 3 a.m. in the morning. So they prefer to come around at times when the outside world is sleeping and everything's basically shut down a bit. That's when they have more freedom, when they can reach us better and they feel more comfortable. So maybe if you're a night owl, you might want to make special use of those hours. Anything from midnight, when most people go to bed. Some people find this time very inspiring, very magical, and indeed I've had a lot of interesting encounters during those hours, so you might want to make use of that if you can. So that is another way. And also what can happen is that you see lights, really lights floating through the room, really through closed rooms in an apartment, in your flat, or wherever you are, and sometimes even in the dark, which is in the beginning quite confusing, because you will look for rational reasons what that could be, but that's just another way of fairies manifesting, and that's actually something you can perceive with your physical eyes. I'm not talking about the third eye here. This is something you can see with your physical eyes, and I've had this happen quite often. Although most of my fairy encounters are something that I perceive with my third eye, but I've also had quite a few, numerous encounters where I actually saw something with my physical eyes. So that's something to look forward to, and yes, I'd like to tell you they can do that, and they have the power, though it's quite draining for them. So it will usually only be a second or less, but do pay attention. Something that you might be seeing in the corner of your eye, certain movement or a light. This is something that the fairies quite often like to do. And what else is important is that the fairies, before they come into our lives and before they make the contact, they will be hesitant in the beginning and see what kind of person they're dealing with. They can see our intention, they can look into our hearts, and they can see what kind of person we actually are. So whether or not we have a good relationship with nature, whether we pollute nature, whether we're very conscious in our decisions, also in our consumptions, everyday life consumptions. Yes, this is also something that influences on how or whether our connection with the fairies will happen. If they see someone is, just basically one of those people who pollutes nature, just throws rubbish into the green, or does other choices in life that are not good for nature, they're actually quite violent against the entity of nature, then don't expect that the fairies will be very curious about you or have an interest in making a connection. And another thing is that fairies can display behavior that's not so sweet and that's not so lovely. That's why they would like to break those stereotypes and would like us to get rid of them altogether, because they are much more than what we were told in fairy tales or whatever sources of knowledge we might possess, or whatever we think of fairies. Fairies can display also quite ugly behavior. If they feel they're being disrespected, if they're actually upset for a good reason, because maybe we have unknowingly destroyed something that belongs to them, belongs to nature. Maybe we've been doing some kind of cutting or whatever in the garden, or we've been to a park and we just took a branch or some flowers. That's something that we need to take into consideration, that there are beings that belong to that part and they need to be either warned, and you need to ask them for permission, and then follow the impulse you get from inside, whether or not this is okay, or you apologize. But always be aware that there's something around you that has a connection to the place. So this is not just a piece of grass, a flower, or a branch. You can understand nature as like a huge organism, and each plant, each leaf, everything is part of it. And that is something that if we destroy it, if we pluck it, if we break something, it's basically hurting the whole organism as a whole. And the fairies are part of it, and that's why they can get quite upset. They can even have an influence on our well-being. They can make you feel nauseous or give you a headache just through their energy. So they're quite powerful, so don't underestimate them, and free yourself from the stereotypical sweet childlike image you may have of the fairies. So that's something that I will delve into deeper in one of my next videos. And for now, I wish you an interesting and very beautiful, magical time connecting with the fairies. Write down the experiences you have and keep your eyes and heart open. Speak to you next time. Bye.